interviewed in hotels.
Yeah. So it goes. So there's so much I want to talk to you about.
Absolutely.
But before we do that, I think a lot of people in the room, I certainly am very familiar with your story, but I think a lot of people may not be familiar with just the story of your origins. So I just want to briefly touch on how you came up with this idea and just sort of the origin story. Can you just share that with us a little bit?
Yeah, probably, let's see, it probably begins with my mom, I guess. I guess all origin stories start with your mom. So, you know, growing up, I grew up in Albany, New York, so I actually think of myself more as a New Yorker. I was for 18, 19 years. And my parents were both social workers growing up. And, you know, my mom, I remember my mom giving me advice when I grew up. She said, you know, Brian, your father and I, we chose a job because we love it, but we didn't really get paid a lot, so you should choose a job for the money. And so, like, it was very obvious. And so, like, we're looking at, like, what jobs pay a lot of money. And so one day I told my mom, like, you know, I think I'm going to go to the Rhode Island School of Design. I'm going to become an artist. At which point she said, you somehow managed to pick the only job in the world that pays less than a social worker. You'll get paid nothing. And I said, I'll make an income. I'll get a job, I promise. And she said, well, I do want you to promise me that if you get a job, that job has health insurance one day. And so this was the kind of beginning of my endeavor. I went to RISD, and it was totally different, because at RISD, everyone was making stuff. They were like, they embraced entrepreneurship. And I graduate RISD. I get this job at health insurance. I'm living in LA, but one of my best friends at RISD was this guy that, named Joe Gebbia. And Joe Gebbia and I were like these kind of entrepreneurial people on campus. And like we both started sports teams at art school. That's the hardest marketing job in the world, get an artist to come to a sports game. And Joe lives in San Francisco at this point. This is like 2007. And he's trying to get me to come to San Francisco. He's like, Brian, come to San Francisco. We're going to start a company together. We're going to start a company together. And I'm like having this job in LA. And I remember at one point my life was like, I was in a car, and the road in front of me looked exactly like the road behind me. And that kind of terrified me, and I wanted to take a detour. So I had this moment, I'm sure all of us have these moments in our life where we make a change, and everything changes after that. I quit my job, and I have an old Honda Civic. I put everything I own in the back seat in the trunk of an old Honda Civic, including a rolled-up foam mattress. I have $1,000 at the bank. And I call up Joe, and I said, I'm coming to San Francisco. And you know, it turns out that Joe said, well, the rent is $1,150. So I actually can't pay rent. It turns out that weekend, this International Design Conference is coming to San Francisco. We go to the conference website. All of the hotels on the conference website are sold out. And so we had this idea. We said, well, what if we just turned our house into a bed and breakfast for a design conference? Unfortunately, I didn't have any beds. But Joe had 3 airbeds. We pulled the airbeds out of the closet. We inflated the 3 airbeds. We called it the Airbed and Breakfast. Yeah. Yeah. I love that noise. And yeah, so that's how it started, airbedandbreakfast.com. So I guess the answer is no. When I started airbedandbreakfast.com, I didn't think I'd be at the New York Stock Exchange. We ended up hosting 3 people, a 35-year-old woman from Boston, a 30-year-old from India, a 45-year-old father of 5 from Utah. But what ended up happening was we ended up becoming friends, and we made enough money to pay our rent. At this point, we say, you know, we're ordinary guys. I bet you there's a lot of other ordinary people like us that want to make some extra money, meet cool people. I asked Joe, I said, well, who's the best engineer you know? Joe said, well, my old roommate Nate is. And so the 3 of us got together, and we had a simple idea. What if you can book someone's home the way you could book a hotel anywhere in the world? And that's how it started.